Now, it gives me great pleasure in introducing today's speaker. Luke Lysen is the founder of the Flight Academy, a Boeing field-based Cirrus Platinum Training Center. Luke has been flying since 1996 and has over 11,000 flight hours, including flights to 6 continents. He piloted the first Cirrus SR-22 to China in 2011 and the first Cirrus Vision to China in 2018 during his around-the-world flight. He has flown all over the U.S., including Alaska and Hawaii, and is passionate about introducing people to aviation. Luke is from Burien and grew up going to the Museum of Flight. He didn't know what he wanted to be when he grew up, so he became a pilot. Please help me in welcoming Luke Lysen up to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Everyone in here is mostly related to me or my friends, so I appreciate you coming on a Saturday in the summer to do this. But we're just going to share a little bit about a trip I did last October and November where I took a Vision Jet around the world, and it's something that not a lot of people get to do. I'm pretty proud of. 6,800 people have climbed Mount Everest, 515 people have been in space, and just over 800 people have flown themselves around the world. So I'm excited to be a member of that club. This is a picture of me in 2005. This is a good friend of mine, Chris Baker, and this is our first time flying across the Atlantic. So this is a Cirrus SR-20. We're on the edge of Goose Bay, Canada, and we had no idea what we were doing. We had a client who asked us to take his plane to Spain for him, so we said yes, and that began a whole series of flights taking planes around the world. My company, the Flight Academy, is a Cirrus standardized training center. We're based here at Boeing Field, but we work all around the country, even around the world. We do adventure trips where we take people to Alaska. We do trips where we fly around Europe with a group of Cirruses. We go out to Fall Colors in Martha's Vineyard, wine country, and we deliver planes internationally. And this was the trip that got it started. Since then, I've had the pleasure of flying over the ocean more than 20 times. This is the chief pilot of Cirrus Aircraft. In 2016, we took the first SF50 to Europe, serial number 9. I was not rated in the plane at the time, but I had the experience flying around the ocean. He had the experience flying a jet, so we put it together and flew jets over the ocean. Since then, I've taken 8 planes to Europe, 8 jets to Europe. This is a plane I delivered to Perpignan, France, near Barcelona. You can see the designation is 2-hour. That's a Guernsey license. So sometimes we have to get different licenses in order to fly the planes because they're registered in different countries. So this particular guy, you can tell he's German, not because the tail number of the plane is in G, but because he has this cool thing in his garage that lifts planes on top of one another. So anyways, last year I was with some friends in Roslyn, Washington. I got a call from the vice president of marketing at Cirrus Aircraft, and he said, we have an air show in China. We want to take our new airplane to China. Cirrus is owned by the Chinese. They wanted to show off their new airplane in China. I have the experience flying planes over the ocean, so that's how we did it. The original routing was not to go around the world. We were going to go up through Alaska, excuse me, technical difficulty. We were going to go up through Alaska to Russia and down to Japan, and it was going to be about a 10,000-mile flight. But the winds in the summer are significantly less than the winds in the winter. So when we went to do the flight in August, we had 100-knot headwinds. We could not go the 913 miles from Adak, Alaska to Petropavlovsk, Russia, or the 985 miles from Petropavlovsk to Sapporo, Japan. There's going to be no way to make it. So I called them up about a week before and I said, I got to go the other direction. So it turned a 10,000-mile trip into an 18,000-mile trip, a little bit different. The good news is, very experienced flying around the United States and through Europe. This is one of my favorite things. If you're a friend of mine, I probably made you look at this video on a text message. But this is going into Greenland, and I love going into Greenland. It's just a very different place. It's rugged, it's beautiful, it's isolated. There are giant icebergs. There's nothing green about Greenland, and it's a place not many people get to go. And so I'm very excited I've gone to Greenland, but we were not in any new territory. We kept going. The interesting thing about the trip, though, is as we were going, the plane was so new. There was not this plane had never been to any of these countries in the world before. So everyone was asking questions. What is a Vision Jet? And you explain to them what it is. Does it have a parachute like the other planes? So you'd tell them it had a parachute. So I actually got to know a lot of the people on social media. This is a video that the controller in Reykjavik took of my takeoff out of Reykjavik, Iceland on a beautiful summer night. It was actually a fall night. And he sent it to me over Instagram, and he's been following the trip ever since, and we still communicate, you know, a little bit on social media. And that would repeat itself over and over again. As I took off out of Reykjavik, though, we had our first trouble on the trip. So I got a generator 2 issue. So generator 2 issue, we also had an issue with the hinge on the airplane. And keep in mind, this was serial number 7. This was the 7th jet they had ever made. So it was, you know, interesting to fly this plane around the world. They had packed the back of the plane with all kinds of spare parts, all kinds of spare equipment, but we didn't have another alternator. So, excuse me, a generator. So we got to General Enterprises, which is a service center in Groningen, Netherlands. And we're like, what are we going to do? You know, it's going to take a week to get the generator here. That's just how it works over there. And it was going to slow down the whole trip. So these guys are pretty creative. They took an alternator out of a Cirrus SR22, and they found out that the brushes in the alternator are the same as in the generator for the thing. And they swapped the brushes, got us back in business, and we were going. So left the Netherlands. This is the chief mechanic, Henk Oosterveen. He's a pretty good guy, and on our way. And now we start to get into the unknown. So flown across the United States many times, flown across Europe many times, but now we're going from Switzerland to Austria to Slovenia to Croatia, Macedonia, and down into Greece. I'd never been to many of those countries, and it was kind of the last of the known. So landed in Greece, and it's a beautiful sight to fly over at night and see the world. This is Santorini from night, and you can see the lights of Athens lit up at night. It's a really cool experience to see the world at night, and you go into some of these countries, and you're seeing all the history, and to see it from night is really exciting. Land in Crete, Greece, and you know, it's Europe, it's popping. It's 10 o'clock at night, and everybody's still up and going. So it landed, you're kind of buzzed, everything's exciting. So I went out on the water, had a great evening. But before I left, you always get the plane figured out. So you get the plane fueled, you get everything ready to go for the next leg, but sometimes things don't go exactly like you planned them. On and then fuel the airplane because it will get heavier and sink down. What are we going to do? We're going to figure this out. We think we'll just push it back. So they don't have general aviation in this parts of the world. So they have giant chocks for a 737. So they put them on the airplane, and it worked until you put, you know, 1,500 pounds of fuel on, and it sinks the plane down, and now you can't move. So we had to get me and 3 Greek guys, and we pushed on the wing, and we pushed the airplane back, and away we go. And when you're flying around in the United States, you can be pretty casual. You can look like a golf pro. You can, you know, you can wear this if you want to. When you fly through the Pacific, you can wear flip-flops and shorts. But when you go to Europe, you got to wear a pilot's uniform. You are not a pilot through the Middle East. You're not a pilot in Asia if you have a pilot's uniform. The good news is they sell these things on Amazon for about 25 bucks. So you can buy yourself a pilot's uniform and some 4 bars, and it is amazing. You can go through metal detectors. You can go around metal detectors. You can walk on a ramp. Nobody questions anything you do if you have this little outfit on. So this is my handler, and we're off. We're leaving the known. So now we're going over the Mediterranean and flying over the Med. Just beautiful sights to see. We get to the shores of Africa. This is the shoreline of Egypt. As we get into Egypt, you'll see it's just a bunch of sand. I thought I was going to be routed over the pyramids, and I was really excited about that. My original routing was over Luxor, and they diverted me, and it's just sand, sand, sand. And then all of a sudden you see this green snake through the middle of the land, and it's the Nile River. And you're seeing the Nile from 28,000 feet. We'll do questions after. And the beauty of that is I was in a modern aircraft, one of the most modern aircraft that they've designed with advanced avionics, flying over one of the most ancient rivers in the world. The kind of juxtaposition was interesting to think about. As we continue on, there's the mountains of Egypt. You know, you don't necessarily think of Egypt having mountains, but it's got these hills. And once again, just thinking of all the history that happened in this part of the world and all the things that continue to happen over there. And it's very interesting to be above it and thankfully at 28,000 feet and not down low. Coming into Hurghada, Egypt, another place you probably never heard of. It is on the Red Sea. It's absolutely gorgeous, crystal clear water like the Bahamas. Don't Wikipedia it though, it'll scare you to death. Coming in here, up high is the runway, and it's 11,000 feet long, 2 runways. The wind was howling 30 knots right down the runway. So you land on the runway, they taxi you over, and it is this beautiful infrastructure. There's 2 giant runways, there's parking. You put 500 Vision Jets. As you see in this picture, I'm not on the yellow line. I wanted to park into the wind. If you're starting a jet engine, it's nice to start with the wind going into the engine as opposed to sideways or even a tailwind. They wouldn't let me park on the line. The handler was marshaling this way, so I whipped the plane around and I parked into the wind. I got out, and the guys on the ground were shaking their hands. They were going crazy. They said, "Get on the headset, get on the headset." So I put the headset back on. I talked to Tower, and we were having a little debate, international debate here, and it just didn't work out. So I said, "No problem." I got out. I got on the wing of the airplane. I pushed the plane around by hand, and I grabbed the tire and just flipped it around. And the handlers had never seen anyone touch an airplane like that. They wanted to bring out the big tug to move it around. It was once again this theme of there's no personal aviation, there's no general aviation over there. Everything is giant airplanes. So I spent about an hour on the ground in Egypt, took off out of Egypt and flew across the Red Sea, and now we're in Saudi Arabia. Going across Saudi Arabia, and it is just desert as far as you can see. It looks a lot like the Southwest if you've ever been looking out the window on your way to Vegas. There's just desert, not much to see. A lot of military aircraft, U.S. military, in registered airplanes. The controllers were Kiwis, which was kind of interesting. There a lot of New Zealand voices. And it looked just like Las Vegas without the freedom. It was just nothing to see there. So we land at King Khaled International Airport, a 13,700-foot runway, a space shuttle alternate, and they taxied me over to the general aviation ramp, got fueled quickly, picked us up in the Mercedes, took us into the FBO, and this is just a picture of the ramp, and you'll notice, look at the airplanes that you'll see. These are all private aircraft, so you'll see big Citation jets, Gulfstreams, Boeing business jets. There's no piston airplanes around. There are no small airplanes. Those are not company-owned airplanes. Those are not airlines. Those are individual aircraft. It's kind of a different world there. Once again, though, pilot's uniform, right through security, past the prayer rooms, got the water, got in the thing, was on the ground in Saudi Arabia for maybe an hour. Could not have been nicer to me. Everybody was amazing. Got in the plane and left. Now, this was going to be an interesting stop. This is leaving Saudi Arabia and going to Muscat, Oman, and you're starting to get into some of the countries that are not on the friendly list. And my routing was going to take me on the shoreline over Qatar, over Dubai, and in, and I got a reroute, and as often happens, you write down the fixes on your kneeboard, you plug them into the GPS, and then you look up. This particular routing was going to take me right down the middle of the Persian Gulf. That's Iran up there on the top left. That's the border with Iran. So you're flying down the middle of the Persian Gulf, and all I'd known about the Persian Gulf is what I remember from CNN, and so you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is interesting. Then what you don't know is the SF50 motor was originally designed for a cruise missile. So you're like, I'm flying a plane that has a cruise missile engine down the middle of the Persian Gulf. Sure hope there's no Iranian guys that think I'm a cruise missile. Came down, flew over Dubai, and the interesting thing about going over Dubai at night in Oman is it is lit up. It is as bright as New York City. You could see the Palm Island that they have beautifully lit up in the air, and flew into Muscat, Oman, a country I'd never been into, landed in Muscat, Oman. They have a giant runway that they have built. The airport's going to support 40 million people, and they make you taxi about 15 minutes to your parking spot. I parked in parking spot 417B, so they have a lot of space on the ramp. This is my handler, and she was very interested. She said, where are your passengers? Well, I don't have any passengers. Then, you never know if it's a compliment when they call your airplane cute. Oh, that's a cute airplane. So she and I got in the 100-person bus and went to the terminal, and the fuel truck for 10,000 gallons came out, and we're like, oh, we'll take 175 gallons, please. And it was just the scale, it was kind of theater of the absurd up there. So you're back at the airport early, though. These days are long. You're doing 3 legs a day, about 2.5 hours each leg, trying to deliver the plane to China before the air show, because they were afraid that the plane might break down somewhere. So they had extra time built in the schedule to solve for a breakdown. So you'd get into the hotel at night, and you're kind of excited. You know, woke up that morning in Greece, flew to Africa, flew to the Middle East, flew to down the Persian Gulf, landed in Oman. It was a pretty heady experience, and you're wired, and you're not sleeping. You FaceTime your family back at home, get a little something to eat, and you go back out to the airport, back at the airport about 5 a.m. And I took this picture because after doing that much flying, the plane needed a little oil. That's totally normal. But the people that were working on the ramp had never seen a pilot with 4 bars on his shoulder climb up and put oil in an airplane. They were like, "Are you sure you're the pilot?" And this is the air stairs for a big airplane. I didn't bring a ladder with me. There was no ladder. So trying to figure out how to get the oil in. So we grabbed some air stairs from the other bay, drug them across the tarmac, set them up there, put oil in the airplane. And I had to take a picture of these guys because they were just laughing. They thought it was hilarious. So took off, and right at sunrise, flying, and I looked up at the map, and I noticed something kind of interesting. I had Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan were the countries that I was flying through. And I was a little bit nervous. I was thinking to myself, you know, this could go sideways, but it's just busy. Your Karachi approach could be Boston approach, you know, with the accent. What's the difference? You can't understand what they're saying anyways. You fly along the coast, and they hand you off from one guy to the next, and I got into India, and I thought it was just going to be city as far as I could see, and it was actually a lot of green in India. It was very hazy. And one of the other pilots on the line, what kind of plane is that? That's a Cirrus SF50? And then he asked the air traffic controller to ask me about the airplane. And so we were doing phone conversation about the airplane. And it was kind of interesting to do that while you're getting vectored around, you know, with Mumbai approach. It's a little busy out there, and they're asking you questions. It was really interesting. Land on the ground. And it's just different, you know, this looks a little different than Boeing Field or SeaTac, right? This is the hangars they have on the ground in India. There were a lot of people there. They were excited to meet me. Everybody was interested. These 2 women are the customs handlers, and not once did they want to see my passport or any documents. They wanted to take selfies of themselves in the airplane. So all about the airplane, what's going on, and it was just fun to share that with everyone, explain to them about what's going on. Now, the interesting thing over here, you ever go to a restaurant and they tell you, like, don't worry about that health violation, that E. coli, we don't have that anymore. And then you start getting your guard. Maybe that says more about the restaurants that I go to, but this is something I've never seen before. I'll let you guys have a look. All right, we're checking the sample again. One more time, please. Okay, I don't see any water in there. Do you guys? Thank you. There's a little something in there. What's that? Oh, that is tattoo. So you're at an international airport, you're getting fuel, and they make you sign a 3-page document that says there's no water in the fuel. So you're immediately scared to death that there's water in the fuel. And water is not a good thing for fuel. So you start thinking about, you know, what am I going to do if my engine flames out on me? And you start sumping the tank, and you're just a little nervous. And I've flown all around the world, and this never happened before. So they just scared the heck out of you in India, and you don't see that anywhere else. Anyways, I'm here, so everything worked out okay. Took off, flew to Calcutta, flew across India to the other side to Calcutta. Didn't know much about Calcutta, but what I did know is it was stiflingly hot in Ahmedabad, and I wanted to get out of Ahmedabad as soon as I could. I was sweating. So in the air, I only bought one of these shirts on Amazon, so I had to dry it out in the cockpit. I made a little birthday video for a friend of mine, and then we landed in Calcutta. And the thing about India that you need to know is everything is very official. Everyone has a uniform. There's stamps. Things have to be stamped. People have you have to go through customs. You have to go through the door. So everybody had a uniform on. Everyone had bars on their shoulder. And all the other airports, I was able to just get in, get out quickly. But here I took about 2 hours, and I don't know if they were messing with me or what, but I landed and I had to use the restroom, and these guys are standing around, about 10 of them, and they're like, just go over there, man. And I look back, there's a patch of grass like 100 yards back. I'm like, what? Yeah, just go over there, man. So I go back, do what I need to do, and right then an Airbus A330 just taxis by with like 200 people on it. And then I get back to the plane, and they're all like, you know, you don't have to do that. We got bathrooms here, man. So we got in this car, and we drove all around the airport for about 2 hours, through security, through international security, back, getting things stamped. It was just kind of a show. And I said, finally, I need to get out of here. Day's getting long. I got to get going. So they said to me, you got to have a boarding pass before you can go. So they whipped up a boarding pass for me, and they just wrote on this piece of paper, a couple of stamps, and now I'm good to go. I'm official. So out of Calcutta and on my way. I had heard an astronaut say one time that you could tell the wealthy parts of the world by when you went around the lights at night. Of course, going into Dubai and Oman, it was lit up. New York City lit up. I was going to take a picture out the window. There's nothing to take a picture out. You fly over Bangladesh and Myanmar, which was my leg here, and there are no lights. It is dark, dark, dark. I thought there might be something. I could not see one light. So kind of gives you a sense of the wealth of those countries. Landed into Thailand. Once you fly there, it's pretty mountainous in northern Thailand. If you go to Chiang Mai, it's Chiang Mai, Thailand. So you come out of altitude, you come through, shoot the approach into the airport. Very modern, English is good. And they parked me out by the fire trucks out on the ramp. Got in late, same thing. Called the family, checked the weather for the next day, getting ready to go. As I got back to the airport, probably the coolest thing or most interesting thing happened. I got to the airport, and the handlers there, they think I look like Elvis, so putting some Elvis songs. I don't think I look like Elvis.
Take my whole life through.
Too funny, too funny. You know, I mean, it's just, you don't get that if you go on a commercial airplane, right? So you got to go in a Vision Jet, and making friends. Everybody's friendly all around the world, all these different communities. They want to interact. They want to ask you questions. They want to share about themselves. And that was probably one of the most interesting things going around. I love that ability to connect with people. So now was going to kind of be the whole thing, getting into China. Let me start before I go any further and just let you know, flying into China is impossible. It is just impossible. They don't have general aviation there. If you go back to the history of the United States, we started with general aviation, right? The Wright brothers were the first people to fly. Then we got into military, commercial. Well, in China, it starts with the military. They own everything. They carve out a little bit of space for the commercial, and there is no general aviation. Every airplane company thinks when it pops, you know, there's 1.2 billion people over there. There's a big middle class. There's going to be a lot of airplanes. It doesn't happen right now. So when I first flew over there, it took 9 months of flight planning to get the SR-22 in, to get the clearances. Our handler over there had iPhones that he was handing out to people as bribes to get through. This time there was a big air show in Zhuhai, so we had a little bit more of an in. But in ferry flying, your schedule's changing. You might get somewhere at noon, you might get somewhere at 10, you know, you don't know exactly. So you're changing things up. And so I'd done that about 3 times, and the Cirrus handler over there called me up and said, they're not going to change anything anymore. If you don't get to the fix by whatever time it was, you're not going to be allowed in the country. They're going to turn you around. So had to do whatever we could do to get out of Thailand, to make it on time. So we crossed from Vietnam into China right on time, made it in, and everything was good. But they do things just different in China. So one of the things is they don't use feet, obviously. Even though the rest of the world is on a metric system, they use feet in aviation. But here they use meters. So they told you to fly at 8,100 meters. So you have to program the avionics to do that. Okay, you can do that. Everyone else is talking in Mandarin. You're speaking in English. It's challenging to understand what's going on. But normally you hear what the other airplanes are doing, so you get a sense of where everybody else is. You don't have that in this case. And then there were no approach plates. So China was not in the database. We were landing in Zhuhai, which is a domestic airport. There was not you couldn't plug it into the GPS. You couldn't pull up the procedures. So I had a friend send me the chart. And it was going to be old school, putting in the localizer needle and flying the numbers. But if anything went wrong, you know, I don't know how your manager. Does someone want to read me the missed approach procedure here? What do you do? So this is what we had to go in. You know, it's like the equivalent of, I don't know what's the equivalent, but going back in time. So we landed 2,000 feet, AGL, no problem. When it landed, it felt like a Kardashian. I mean, all these people wanted to take my picture. They're excited about the airplane. It was pretty cool. This is the view from the other side, and it was a whole production to get in. It was really interesting. This is Scott Jang, the Cirrus salesman and also the handler. He was instrumental in getting us there, and he speaks the language and knows the customs and got us in. We taxied in. Cirrus is owned by a Chinese company. Here's the test pilots and engineers over there. Took a picture with them. And what do you do when you get a plane halfway around the world to China? You celebrate with some leftover pizza that they give you. As I was leaving, I ran into a group of first graders. They were taking a tour of the factory, and they spoke perfect English, dare I say better English than I spoke. And they were asking me questions, and we're showing them, this is a guy, took this picture, I had no idea who he was. He found me on WeChat, which is the equivalent of, you know, that's how they do it over there in China. And so he texted me this picture like a week later and said, I saw you at the thing, and this is a picture you might want to know, and he wanted to come to the United States and do some flying, so it's kind of cool. Went home for 2 weeks. And they did the air show in China, came back, and we were going to leave and complete the flight. I see Gary Black back here from Cirrus Aircraft, and he's heard this story before, but Cirrus wanted to move the plane from Zhuhai to Macau to help us get going a little bit. So they had a salesman and a mechanic in the plane, and they were going to do that. And it was a Sunday night. They got in the plane, they taxied out, they cleared exit customs from Zhuhai, China, and they got to the end of the runway. They were not allowed to take off and go into Macau because the plane was not in the system. It was so new that it wasn't in the system. So whoever's working air traffic control at 8 p.m. at night in Macau wouldn't let the plane come. So the plane taxied back to the ramp, but all the customs people had left. So they weren't allowed to get out of the airplane. So they were stuck in the airplane for 7 hours. They weren't allowed to leave. They weren't allowed to get out and go to the bathroom. So these guys were in the plane for 7 hours, and they finally had to threaten calling the senators and the consulate, and they got let out. So we show up on Wednesday, and we're thinking, you know, this could be kind of rough. We got through Chinese customs. We got through the weather people. We got through everything, and it worked out amazing. Everyone wanted to take pictures, so we took some pictures. We took some more pictures. We discussed setting up a basketball league with the other pilots. And we departed and went over to Macau. I don't know if you know anything about Macau, but it makes Vegas look small. This is... so you can see the Venetian over there. There's all the hotels that there are in Vegas. And we land on the ground. We're on the ground for about 15 minutes because you cannot take off from China and fly to Taiwan. They don't play nice together. So you had to go a 13-mile flight, which took 45 minutes. And we landed in Macau, cleared customs. We were on the ground there for maybe 20 minutes. It was $2,200. And that was probably cheap. When we were in Japan, it was $7,000 to land on the ground there and be there. So it's just a little bit different than flying to Friday Harbor. We took off out of Macau, went over to Taiwan, and this is kind of humorous. Dale's not here. He tells this story better than me, but I'd flown around the world a lot. I know all the survival stuff. He's the CEO of Cirrus Aircraft, so about halfway through, he turns to me and goes, what's that raft for and those survival suits in the back? Oh, yeah, we better tell you how all that stuff works. So we had a little conversation about our survival gear on the way to Taiwan. We land in Taiwan, do a quick turn, and we're on our way to Kagoshima, Japan. It's not every day you see a smoking volcano on final, so we're going into Kagoshima, Japan, and there's a volcano erupting. And so that's interesting. You land in Japan, and it's a little bit different there. So this happened.
You're taking. Oh, hold on.
Okay. I'm okay.
He's okay. You're taking. Oh, hold on.
I'm okay.
He's okay.
You open the door, and the first thing you see is that guy with the surgical mask on, and he puts a thermometer right on your face, and he wants to know what your temperature is. If you're sick, they're not going to let you in the country. So they take your temperature, and I guess we passed, but he doesn't speak any English. He doesn't ask anything. You just open the door and just right on your head. All right. Cirrus Japan is based in Kagoshima. They are a great Cirrus partner. They have a lot of aircraft. They do a lot of testing. So this was the first Vision Jet there. These guys are pilots. They're interested in it. This picture sticks out because you're supposed to fill the Vision Jet 75 gallons at a time so it doesn't get off balance and potentially tip over. Well, Dale, You know, he invented the thing. He wasn't having it. So he's like, I'll sit on the other wing, fill it up all the way. Let's get the heck out of here. So we did that. More pictures. Everyone's excited. Take off, see the airplanes as we depart, and we fly up from the bottom of Japan to the top of Japan. And Japan is lit up. You can see the lights of Hiroshima, see the lights of Tokyo. It's a pretty beautiful country, and we were on our way. The whole reason we had gone this way was so we could have a tailwind. We went 8,000 more miles all the way around the country, all the way around the world, all the shenanigans to go this way. So when we get to Sapporo, of course we have a headwind. So we are stuck in Sapporo for the day because we have a headwind. The plane's not capable of going the 985 miles. So 2 men of culture like us, the only thing we know about Sapporo is? Yay, you guys are cultured too. Get it, good. So we took a tour of the Sapporo beer factory, and it was pretty funny. Dale had this phone that if you put up the camera to the sign, it will tell you what it is in English. So he's putting the sign up. So we wanted to go to the beer garden. So this is the beer garden. There's a little something lost in translation in Japan, I think. That went off a lot funnier in front of the pilots. This is a woman who led us on the tour. She speaks zero English, and we went around the tour for an hour listening to her just so we could get to the free beers at the end, and they were delicious. And then we spent the day having a traditional Japanese meal at the sushi bar and drinking some sake, and then we're on our way. The next leg, 985 miles from Sapporo, Japan to Petropavlovsk, Russia. And this is what happens when you pull up the nearest page on your GPS. There's nothing there. If you have a problem, you're in trouble. Luckily, we didn't have a problem. We landed in the Kamchatka Peninsula, and you can't imagine the scale. These are 10,000-foot mountains. They're giant. They're beautiful. There's nothing there. It's absolutely gorgeous out there. Petropavlovsk that's the airport right in the middle, and it's an old sub base for Russia. So we flew over this bay. You can see the scuttled diesel subs and the nuclear subs in there, and we landed. And it's kind of like going back in time. It's a time warp. All the old airplanes are on the ramp. All the old hangars are on the ramp. Everything's pretty different. They were pretty friendly to us. We landed there. We got fuel. We were going to be on our way, but we were worried about the winds. So we're checking the winds. There was another ferry pilot who went the other direction, and he was telling us that he had a tailwind, which isn't good for us. So we had mentioned to our handler, we might want to stay, because in Russia, you don't need a visa unless you're there for more than 24 hours. So we're like, okay, well, we land at 2 o'clock. We will be here for 8 o'clock in the morning, less than 24 hours, we'll go. And she's like, no, you cannot stay. So we got pretty clearly told not to be in Russia. So we jumped in the plane and we got out of there, but we wanted to get some pictures because all the guys walking around were like the Hunt for Red October. They had the hats on, they had the guns, but they wouldn't pose for any pictures with us, so we took a picture with the fuelers instead. We took off, and our out it was 913 miles. We weren't sure about the winds. The communication was a little tough, but our out was that there's Shemya Air Force Base 600 miles away. So if we got in trouble, we were going to land at this Air Force Base and rather be in trouble with the Americans than the Russians. Now, the good news was nothing happened. We landed in Adak, Alaska at night, and there's nothing going on in Alaska. We landed in the United States, and the worst place to clear customs in the whole world, worse than Saudi Arabia, worse than Egypt, worse than Europe, is right back here in the good United States of America. So we landed in the United States, no customs agent, no problem. They were okay with that. Who knows? Then we stayed at you don't go to the hotel in Adak. There's no hotels there. There's no restaurants there. There's nothing there. So we stayed at the Adak Inn and Spa. There's a little townhouse. We kind of found somebody to rent us this place, stayed there for the night, and the next morning took off, and you're flying down the Bering chain in the Aleutian Islands in the Bering Strait. And if you've not had the chance to see it, it is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. There are mountains, snow-capped, that go right down to the ocean. The water's pristine. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is another volcano that we flew over, so we're trying to take a picture of Dale flying over the volcano. And we made our way into Cold Bay, and we knew we were back in America when we saw the Amazon packages. Home again, home again. So back in the United States, and something straight out of a movie, this woman who was helping us get fueled and do different things, she's the mayor of Cold Bay, Alaska. She works on the ramp at the airport. We took off, we landed in Juneau and finally met the customs agents. We're a little nervous about what was going to happen. They couldn't have been nicer. This lady drove us to get a sandwich, asked us what we needed. She was awesome. They were both awesome. Then we took off, and the last leg made it home, and we landed in Renton, Washington. Did I say that right, Jeff? Renton, Washington? And, we got the victory cigars out, and we completed our around-the-world flight. And Dale was pretty excited about it. Something he'd want to do. It was something I had always wanted to do. So it was 12 days, 77 flight hours, 26 stops, 19 countries, and we took this plane around the world for the first time. So it was a pretty amazing experience, something I'm proud that I got to do, and that's it. That completed the trip. I'm just going to watch a quick little video here. Cirrus made a little video of it, and then do some questions and get out of here. My name's Luke Lysen, and I'd like to tell you about my trip around the world in a Vision Jet. It was 77 hours. It was 26 stops, 19 countries. It was a long time in the airplane, but if you're going to go around the world, go in a Vision Jet. I love going to new places, the adventure challenge of going to somewhere I've never been before, just getting to see things that are different than your everyday.
This is where the around the world flight begins, Renton, Washington.
The great thing about flying the Vision Jet around the world is the capability of the airplane. We're pressurized. We're going to 28,000 and now 31,000 feet. It's just a really capable aircraft. And the last 70 miles in Narsarsuaq, is beautiful. You're flying up the fjords. There's icebergs as tall as buildings, glaciers to be seen.
Today we take off from Greece and go to Egypt, Saudi, and Oman. And we're not a pilot in the Middle East if you don't have a pilot's uniform. So there we go.
Plane is beautiful, weather looks pretty good, little clouds, but we'll be on top.
Every place I would land was often the first time a Vision Jet had been to that country. Cirrus does have a good reputation. Oh, the Cirrus, that's the plane with the parachute. Does the jet have the parachute? Oh, how does the jet have a parachute? That's really cool. But mostly I was introducing them to personal aviation and how I came from the other side of the world, and I came in comfort and in style, and I flew myself. There was a large part of this trip that was going to be a new experience for me, and I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. Everywhere I landed was greeted warmly. When I was in India, had my passport ready. They had no interest in that. They were interested in the airplane, and they kind of asked me if it was okay to take a picture. They got to climb into the cockpit and sit in the pilot's seat and take a picture of themselves, and I can only imagine all the people that then saw those pictures. My favorite part of the trip was probably the experience on the tarmac at Chiang Mai, Thailand.
They think I look like Elvis, so doing some Elvis songs. I don't think I look like Elvis.
And we're sitting there on the ramp, and this guy pulls out his phone and starts singing Elvis songs to me, and a cool memory, and one of those things I think you only get to experience in general aviation. Zhuhai is what they call a domestic airport and not an international airport. It's a cool feeling to land somewhere and be the first time this plane had ever visited China, and everybody was excited to see it, and there was customs officers, and seemingly everyone at the airport was kind of huddled around the airplane. It was pretty cool. Met up with Dale Klattmeyer, the CEO and co-founder of Cirrus Aircraft, and I was looking forward to this. I knew Dale, for 15 years a little bit, but getting to share the cockpit with Aviation Hall of Famer and someone with his background and experience was going to be a real treat.
See you guys, bye!
There's a volcano that has smoke coming out of it as the sun is setting as we turn base into Kagoshima. It was a surreal experience.
All right, Dale, we're off to Russia.
And then across the Bering Sea to Adak, Alaska, and then to Cold Bay, Alaska, and then to Juneau, Alaska, and then down home to Renton, Washington. It's just one of those small town Alaska feels. The mayor of Cold Bay was helping us get fueled and filed, and how quintessential Alaska. Feeling of being back home again, and what we had just done sort of washed over us. And it was just a cool experience.
Finishing around the world flight. It's been a great adventure, a lifelong dream.
I never thought I'd have the opportunity to visit so many places and meet so many people and experience so many things on a single trip. The Cirrus life, to me, that means the freedom to fly yourself and your family safely, literally to anywhere in the world. So having a Vision Jet gives you the world. Thank you for coming. I appreciate everyone taking their time on a Saturday to come. I think we're going to open it up if you have any questions, but I really appreciate all the support. Thank you very much. Should I keep one that I talk to? I'll talk now.
Yeah. Do we have any questions out in the audience? Oh, did you hear that?
Get the microphone. Yeah, this is serious. How did you originally get affiliated with Cirrus when you started?
Does it work? Check, okay. It turned out that the first place I worked for, Wings Aloft over at Boeing Field, had the original training contract. So I'm from Seattle. I got my instructor certificate. I just started teaching at the local flight training place, and they had the contract with Cirrus. So I got checked out into Cirrus. I started teaching people in Cirrus, and then one thing led to another. I ended up working back at the factory in Duluth for a year.
What did your trip cost Cirrus? You don't have to break out your fee.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's pretty expensive to fly around the world. Like I said, to be in all these places, we landed in Japan twice. It's $7,000 a stop. That doesn't even include the fuel. Where were the gambling place was $2,500. So all the places were expensive. So it was about $100,000 to take the plane around the world. That's why the jets cost $3 million.
I was just wondering, Luke, did you have any abnormals at all? Sound like you had really no maintenance or issues. I was wondering about the redundancy on the airplane. That generator, I'm not sure if that was on the Vision Jet or another Cirrus. Is there like two generators, two pneumatic systems, or what's the redundancy that a multi-engine airplane would have in a single engine?
Right, it's a good question. So to answer your first question, knock on wood, we only had one time that leg going out of Reykjavik where the Gen 2 was on the fritz, so we got that replaced. They also came up, was taking off and trying to level off at 28,000 feet, and the plane would not level off. It just kept climbing. So we had to took all the effort to push the plane forward and disconnect. So they have a service bulletin where they grease the piano hinge now. But we're very lucky on that. As to the redundancy, there are two generators. There are two screens for avionics, but then you do start, it's only one engine, right? And there's only one pressurization system. There are two fuel valves. So there are a few areas where there's double, but the one that counts the most, the engine, there's only one of those. So that's why they have the parachute, though, as sort of your backup plan for that.
How's the design of the parachute different from the SR-20 and 22?
It's a good question, and one that I'm not fully able to answer for you. I mean, the main difference between the parachute design is that it is much bigger. The SF50 is a 6,000-pound airplane versus a 3,600-pound airplane, so the parachute has to be able to support that. The other big difference is, you don't think about this necessarily, but if it inflates at higher altitude, the air is less dense. So how does it inflate with less air going into it? And then thirdly, you're going at much, double the speeds essentially. So how does it inflate? So they spent a lot of time testing that. They threw a lot of, pallets out the back of C-130s in the desert, and they have an amazing engineering thing. But that was probably one of the more difficult challenges about the airplane, is figuring out how to get the parachute to work at those altitudes, at those speeds, with those weights.
What was your favorite place that you went to?
Yeah, it's one of these things where I go around and I say I flew around the world, and I did, but I didn't get to see too many places. You go to the hotel at 8 o'clock at night and you leave at 6 in the morning, so you don't get to see the world. So I'm not sure how to answer that. The place that I want to go back to the most and check out is Oman and then Thailand. I want to check out those two places. Oman looked really interesting to me, and you know, something I saw, the water there, you can go scuba, you can go out and see all these rock formations, so I thought that'd be cool. And then go back to Thailand. I have some friends that have done Thailand, and that's a place I want to visit.
So back to the parachute question, I would assume that...
Gary, you might have to get up here.
No, I won't. So I assume that part of the development and testing of this plane doesn't involve testing the parachute in an actual plane, because I think, do I understand correctly, once that's activated, it destroys the plane and pow?
Yeah, I mean, once the plane is, if you activate the parachute, the plane's over. But they have tested it on a real aircraft. They have actually have video of pulling the parachute in the desert and testing the airplane. So they do it, you know, they model it extensively. They drove a race car on a track and tried to get the speed and shoot it out with the same G-forces. But they have actually, right down in Northern California, taken the plane up and pulled the parachute on the jet. So it has been tested. We actually, in the back is a guy named Gary Black, who was on the team that developed the original parachute. And I don't know, you want to add anything, Gary?
Thank you, Luke. On the SR-20, we did 89 parachute drops. We did about 200 rocket firings, and we did 8 actual deployments. When we went to the Generation 5, we did another 79 parachute drops to develop the 3,600 square foot parachute. And when we went to the Vision Jet, that was about a 3-year program to develop it. The parachute on the SR piston series is about 60 pounds. On the jet, it's 100 pounds. So we used 3 airbags firing in sequence to get it clear of the aircraft. Then a rocket will pull the parachute bag off the parachute. The airplane, it is in the nose. The straps are underneath the skin. It still comes down level. We do land the airplane with the landing gear up, so you don't worry about puncturing a fuel tank. But we did 2 unmanned and 1 manned on the Vision Jet. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. All right. Well, once again, thank you for coming in on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I know it's an August Saturday. That's a very valuable commodity. So I appreciate you sharing that with me, and thanks for coming down to the museum. And thank you to the museum. What a wonderful place this is.